Alright everyone, today I wanted to talk to you about why your music sucks. Believe me, I know a lot about my own music sucking for a very long time. I've been making electronic music for about 10 years, and it's only really recently that I've started to actually make music that I'm proud of and other people want to listen to and labels will respond to. So the key to my very limited success as of late is using templates, presets, and samples. And those are all things that I tried to steer away from the longest time, simply because of, I don't know, pride, or just thinking that I didn't make everything from scratch, or it wasn't something I could be proud of. But I've changed my tune on that issue, so to speak, lately, in favor of the end result just being good. I want to make something that, sounds good, and it's not necessarily something I need to be ashamed of, using presets, samples, and templates, because the majority of people that are going to listen to my music are not producers. They're not people that are going to be able to pick it apart and say, oh my gosh, you used this preset from this sample pack or what have you. It's the path of least resistance for for myself, and I would think for a lot of newer producers that are out there that are maybe struggling to get mix downs or are trying to get song structure the way that they hear it in tunes that they admire or look up to. I'm going to be showing you a tune that I made today called High Alert. It's from my project called Doc Dash, and we're just going to go through the first and second drop. It's a bass house tune that switches into drum and bass for the second drop.
Dance floor is on high alert.
Okay, you kind of get it for the first drop. Now the second drop, I've automated the master tempo to speed up to 172 BPM, and it goes a little something like this.
This dance floor is on high alert.
Alright, so that just gives you a little idea of the tune and how loud it is and the sonic impact. It's probably one of the better mix downs that I've ever had or ever done, and a large part of that is because of the template that I used. So there's lots of different templates out there for every different type of genre. Cymatics is obviously a resource that a lot of people use. I've stumbled upon just recently Abletunes, and they have a bunch of templates that you can choose from. This isn't a paid promotion or anything. I just wanted to share this. There's actually every single genre that you could imagine on here in terms of electronic music. And there is, under the bass house section, there's actually a free one here. And this is the template that I used. I'll just play you a little sample of it. Hopefully I don't get tagged for copyright. Anyway, you can go check it out for yourself. I will try to remember to throw a link in the description below. And I just thought the mix was really well balanced. Everything was really clear. All the elements were separated, and the mix sounded very glued. And my plan was to basically just take this template, try reverse engineer it, and keep the parts that I wanted, and basically, delete the parts that I didn't, and try and fill in the structure that was already there with my own sounds that I've been creating over the past, I think, year or so, trying to put together this project. So I opened the template, and you can see that it's really well laid out in terms of all the used samplers and groups for all the different parts of the song. So I have my kick drum, and then I have my top percussion group. There's a bunch of things that I've added, and then they have their instrument group here, and then again, more tracks that I've added. And really what I wanted was to keep the drums, because the drums were already really well balanced, and the kick was nice and punchy, and it allowed me to have a reference point with which to mix the rest of the track. And when you get a template that you really like, you can then use it for all tracks within a certain EP or a certain project, and that way you're always going to have similar levels across all your tracks. Everything's going to sound consistent. And another thing that I've been doing is taking all of the sound design and the synths that I've made over the past 6 months, and making sure that I am saving them. So by that I just mean, take for instance this bass here. Once I make or design a sound, either from scratch or by tweaking a preset, I will take all of the, and this is probably pretty well known, but take all of the effects that I have added to the bass synth. I'll highlight them all, right? And then I'll hit Control G or Apple G and group the effects rack with the synth, and then save it with this button here, and then it will pop up in my user library under presets, instruments, and instrument racks. And then that way, everything that I've completed for that song, I can then draw from for future tracks. And then when I'm using a template, I can just drag and drop them into my timeline, and I'm going to be able to use the same sounds that I've made across a lot of different tracks. And again, with the template, it's going to be 90% of the way there in terms of a mixdown. Now, with this one, I basically deleted most of, or turned off rather, most of the instruments that were included in the track. I really just kind of used the drums. They have a sampler on most of the drum hits, allowing me to use the hot swap feature right here in order to just go and swap out the sounds with a clap or a hi-hat that I liked, and it made the writing process and my workflow that much quicker. So usually I would start with looping. I just, in case you don't know the hotkey there, I highlighted a section and then pushed Control L, and then I was able to just focus on one 4-bar loop and try to create a phrase within that loop that I thought sounded good. And with this track, I experimented with some of the synths that came with the track. There's this main bass line here. It's a sound that's created by Operator, and it's a cool sound. But that sound has kind of been played out a little bit, I feel, and I wanted to make something that was, a little bit different. And I experimented, you can see, with a lot of these synths that I had saved, and I couldn't really find anything that was really grooving. So I'd recently downloaded a sample pack, which I highly suggest you guys pick up. It's Document One's drum and bass sample pack, and you might not think to use drum and bass samples in a house track, but I discovered a cool way to to stretch the loops in order to make them fit. What I mean by that is I'll just go through some of the samples in here because they are really cool. They're just they're all super high quality, and they have these really cool bass guitar / neuro hybrid loops that are amazing. Yeah, so I won't go through too many of them. But this particular loop that I used is the main bass in the track. So let's listen to it. So the loop that I used for that, let's bring it up in my Explorer here, was this loop. That's a really popular sound right now. A lot of artists are using that sub bass that's layered with some white noise on top to give the sub this, obscene amount of width. It really fills out the stereo field. So what I did to snap that to 124 beats per minute is I would drag the loop into my DAW, and when you play just the isolated loop, you can hear that it's way too fast. Right, so all we would have to do is go to the actual sample itself. We want to make sure that we're always using Complex Pro with the formats turned all the way down to make sure that there's no weird artifacts in the sound. So right now it's playing at 87 beats per minute. So I'm going to make sure that it's warped to 124 beats per minute, and then I'm going to type in the original beats per minute of the sample, which is double. I think that's twice 87. So I've stretched it out double the length, and you can hear that it's much slower now, twice as slow in fact. So I really liked that crunchy bass. The original sample didn't quite have the top end that I wanted, so I've taken the very start of this sample, and you can see it right here, and it's just a bass hit that I've transposed. I think I might even consolidated it once or twice, but I got the note that I wanted by using a tuner. I wanted the song to be in the key of G, so I know it's in the key of G, and I just wanted the bass to play on this track, and then I duplicated the track, cut out the bass frequencies so that I could just affect the top end of the stereo field. You obviously want all your bass sounds, anything below 100 hertz, really, to make sure that it's in mono, and you can spread out the stereo imaging as you get into the higher frequencies. So that's basically what I've done here. This weird EQ curve just seemed to work. I really boosted the highs here to get that crunch. I don't know if you're familiar with the artist Ahi, but he has an amazing set of Ableton racks that I use all the time. This one in particular, he's Fat Magic Rack, has a really nice subtle amount of distortions, a lot of multiband and regular parallel compression in there that just really brings out the harmonics and really makes a song, or sorry, a sound really fat. So I'll turn it off. And obviously it's louder, but it really works, and sometimes I'll use multiple instances of it. A saturator where I've really boosted the drive, a chorus to just make it a little bit wider. Obviously I'm side chaining most of the sounds, especially in a house track, to the kick. And then there's just a touch of reverb that I use in the breakdown on that particular sound. And all together it sounds. The other sound, the main kind of, I guess, slap bass guitar sound is also from the sample pack. This particular sample. And you can see that I have shamelessly just dragged and dropped it right into the grid here. I have these start hits that at each kick drum on a separate channel that I've done the same technique to widen it out, so you're going from stereo to mono, stereo to mono. It's a really good technique as well to have within your phrasing, is to not just focus on what sounds really blend together and create a groove that is infectious and makes you want to keep listening and bob your head to, but also focus on where those sounds are placed within the stereo field. It's not something that a lot of people, the average person, is going to pay attention to, but it can create this kind of, intangible quality to a song where you're going from stereo to mono to stereo to mono, and it can create a really cool atmosphere. And that's what I was trying to do with this. I've taken the first hit here and pitched it down a couple times, and you can hear that even though it's a drum and bass loop, it sounds really good at a house tempo. And these hits here are to try and tie in some of the sounds that I've used in my other tracks. So in some of my other tracks, I've used this particular bass quite a bit, and I think it's important to do that, to be able to have a signature bass or a signature sound that you drop into a lot of your tracks. I've noticed that Joyride does that a lot. He has a couple samples that he recycles throughout a lot of his songs. It's a really good way to brand yourself, and that's another thing that I hadn't really understood until, or I really appreciated how important it is to be able to brand your sound. It's just like any business or a logo, for instance. You want someone to identify that logo and be like, that's that company, right? It's same thing with audio. You want to be able to, at some point, like a Joyride's another really good example. I'll hear a track, I'll hear those particular sounds and be like, this must be a Joyride track, even if I didn't know it was that artist. So what I'll do is I'll loop, say 4 bars, and then I'll just keep dragging and dropping either samples or synths and arranging them in different orders until I get something that sounds like a banger, essentially. And then I'll usually recycle that, bringing in and out different hi-hat and drum elements until I have enough variations to carry me through the entire drop. And the end of this drop goes like this. I have something soloed. right here. So, and some, a lot of more like, I won't say amateur, but people that are kind of just getting started, they're not really familiar with sound design or song structure. I hear them layering too many sounds that conflict with each other, either in frequency range or they're not separated. They're not separating in the stereo field properly. So you can hear within this phrase that it sounds like there's a lot going on, but each sound has a spot where it hits. There isn't even, this is the same sound layered up, but there aren't two different sounds that are layered on top of each other that is supposed to be the main driving part of the track. Right? Now there is a sound in the background, which is just a siren that I ripped off of YouTube. But it's not interfering with the same frequencies, and it's panned almost to mono. I have a flanger on here, which is really good for placing things within the stereo field, and it has some reverb to separate it from the main elements of the track, and also obviously the volume is turned really far down. And then there's little woos and stuff like that to fill in the gaps. But that's what phrasing is all about, is getting your separate sounds, making sure they have their own spot to shine in the little part that they do play in. And then just continually trial and error until you get a happy accident, as Bob Ross would say. And then just constantly doing that, and the more you practice that, the it'll become obvious to you what should come next. The drum and bass part is the same process essentially. I've taken the exact same kick drum. I added in a snare. The snare in this track I really enjoy in the drum and bass section. I think you already heard that part. I'll play a different part. Yeah, the snare in this is from a cymatics pack, and I've found they have a free download vault with a lot of amazing samples. The Nightmare snares are amazing, but they all have a lot of reverb and huge tails on them. So a good way to get rid of those is just to shorten it up and just take the tails right out. That's essentially all I've done. And the snare hits really loud and cuts through the mix pretty much on its own. I don't actually even have any compression on this sound. And that's something I've realized too, is only compress something or only throw an EQ on something unless it needs it. So try the sound just dry on its own, and if it doesn't feel like it's quite cutting through the mix, then try sidechain it or try compress it, but only start adding effects with a purpose. Don't just throw compressors and EQs on everything, because it might be fine just on its own. For the phrasing in this one, It's pretty much the same process. I've used the same bases and different parts of that same sample, but this time I didn't need to snap it, or I didn't need to snap it to 124 beats per minute. I could just drag and drop the sample right into the timeline. So that's another thing too that I should mention, is using samples in general is something I never used to do because I had too much pride. Because I needed to make all my own sounds, and I wanted to sound unique, and I've changed my thoughts on that in the sense that if it sounds good, just do it. It's so much easier and quicker just to find a sound using a sample than it is to try and design it on your own. Sound design's hard enough. I mean, I still really struggle with it. I'm a lot better than I used to be, but use your samples as much as you can, because it's going to allow you to finish tracks quicker. It's going to allow you to understand how to make something that sounds good to other people a lot better. And to be honest, the majority of people that do end up listening to your music are not going to care or know the difference. And that's something that I've kind of struggled with, just kind of ethically speaking. Is it okay to use so many samples? But when the end result is something that is much better than you could have maybe sound designed on your own, then I think it's worth it. And you can worry about the intricacies of sound design later on down the road. Anyway, that's pretty much the track. If anyone wants any of the sounds, or wants me to go into anything in more depth regarding this track, I will say that this file, or this template, is looking pretty messy, and I just finished the song. But usually what I'll do is, after I've auditioned all these sounds that don't work, I'll go through and clean everything up so that it's much more organized for me to go and do one more pass of a mix down before it gets fired off to labels and whatnot. But yeah, that's about it for this walkthrough and discussion of why I think it's important for newer producers to use templates. And you'll get cleaner mix downs, you'll get quicker workflow, and you'll be able to do more composing and actual writing music, as to fiddling with dials and knobs and stuff, which is kind of not the fun part. It's cool to know that stuff, but once you've reverse engineered a few of these templates, that will start to become obvious, and you probably won't go back to not designing an open project from scratch anymore when you know you can write really good music much quicker doing it this way. Anyway, if you like the song, please go to our SoundCloud at .-bassmusic and give us a follow. We're gonna make lots of music coming out. And also, I make music under the alias Hyperlynx, so go check me out there. That's Hyperlynx, the links like a cat. And I'll leave it there for now. Let me know what you thought of the video, like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.